Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm talking to you about most of the books that I read in February. So in February I read 11 books, of which I'm going to talk about 7 of them today. The other 4 were part of my challenge that I have with my partner, which is where we are giving each other books to read. I've not actually finished that yet. I've got one more book of his that I need to get through. So when I have done that, there will be a separate TBR video for all of those. We were hoping to get it all done in February, but we have not quite pulled it off. So that is still in the pipeline. I'm doing a buddy reading march with Amy from Amy Gets Lit. I'll link her channel down below, and we are reading Suicide Club by Rachel Hang. If I get any more details about that, I will link them in like the next relevant video, or I will add them in the description down below afterwards. But obviously anybody is welcome to join us if you fancy reading it as well. So we're going to be doing that through the bulk of March. Okay, let's jump in with all of these books. It's been a bit of a slow reading month in a lot of ways, no new favourites found or anything like that. I did reread one of my old favourites, which I really enjoyed, but generally everything was sort of sitting at the 3 to 4 star mark. So I'm just going to kind of go in order, like chronological order, so that I don't forget anything, because nothing is jumping out as immediately interesting to talk about. So the first book I read is Fup by Jim Dodge. This is a short story novella type thing, which is a quirky little tale about a duck with a big personality that finds its way into a family and kind of causes a bit of chaos. It was a cute story and I liked the characterization for the most part, but it was far too short, which meant that it really didn't do justice to anything in it particularly, and I really didn't like the ending. I felt like the ending was a total cop-out to make the book as short as it was, so I gave that one 3 stars. Then I read The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. So I listened to this on audiobook. This is a historical fiction slash sci-fi slash speculative kind of fiction about what would have happened if during the time of the space race in the 50s there had been an asteroid strike on the Earth that was going to lead to basically another extinction event in sort of 50-60 years time, and our space race was less about just trying to discover space and more about giving us a viable option of how we were going to survive this by trying to relocate a decent amount of the population. I don't know how necessary the asteroid element was. Once that initial event had happened at the beginning of the book, it then very much just fell into the story of the space race with underlying sort of hints to this impending doom coming. It's also part of a series, so don't get your hopes up that they're going to get to space yet. It is a very slow burn book with a lot of technical information, and I think it's definitely got at least one more book, maybe even 2. I think it might be a whole trilogy, and it's going to take them a while to get anywhere. The main character is a female, and there's a lot of discussion about sexism and racism in it, especially with it being set in the 50s, and she does a lot of work to try and help to overcome a lot of these issues. There are no black astronauts being picked, they're fighting for a lady astronaut to be able to go up, they're just kind of pushing for lots of different rights in different areas. So I think a decent chunk of the story is dedicated to that over any of the kind of science or sci-fi elements. So that could either be a pro or a con in your eyes, depending on how much of a hardcore sci-fi fanatic you are and how much you like there to be other things thrown in with it. Also, what I will say as well is that the main character does suffer from anxiety attacks, and there are some discussions about taking drugs to treat this and what exactly that entails for her as a character. It was really interesting to read actually, because I didn't realise that she was suffering kind of formally from anxiety until very far through the book, and I was getting very annoyed with some of her actions until I realised that actually this was something that she was genuinely really struggling with, and it was kind of a moment of realization of me as a reader and as an individual that I was being very flippant and neurotypical about my reading of this character, and that wasn't very fair, because anxiety is not something that I've ever personally suffered with, nor do I really know anybody particularly close to me in like a day-to-day life who suffers from it in a way that I am aware of. So in that respect, it was a very educational moment and a real kind of moment of clarity for me about the kind of judgments I was putting on this character, and then by proxy the kind of judgments I probably make about people in general, about being anxious about certain things, and why mentally telling a character just pull yourself together love isn't actually appropriate. And that's why I really love reading, because it does give you an opportunity to get into other people's heads and make some realizations about stuff that you don't have a personal frame of reference for. So I just wanted to kind of cover all of that because the calculated stars from the outside just looks like a fairly standard sci-fi, but I think that it has a lot more to it, and I think that it is a very interesting read, and I'm really looking forward to continuing on with the series. It wasn't my favourite. I think it's a bit too slow paced for me personally, but I did give it 4 stars, and I think it is a wonderful read. Then I read a graphic novel. I read Paper Girls Volume 1. I did not particularly enjoy this. It reads like Stranger Things, but if all the cast were female. It was a bit wacky, a bit ridiculous, something to do with aliens, maybe time paused at one point. I'm really not 100% certain what even happened, to be honest. It's set in the 80s, and it's 4 12-year-old newspaper delivery girls who kind of uncover some sort of alien supernatural mystery type thing. The artwork is brilliant. There's this really like overlay of colours on each of the pages, so you get like, it's really stylized, and I definitely enjoyed that, but I didn't find that any of the characters were particularly well developed, and there was a very scattergun approach to the plot points as such. There was just a lot of like, and then this happened and it's completely unrelated kind of a vibe. I may continue with the series. I haven't fully decided yet. I might give it like 1 more volume to see if it starts to pull things together a little bit more. Then I have my reread. I reread Innocence by Kathleen Tesserow. This is one of my favourite books ever. It's probably my all-time favourite romantic book, and whilst there is a romance, in fact there are several romances in the story, it fundamentally at its heart is a story about self-discovery and self-love, which is one of the reasons why I really love it. So our main character, Evie Garlick, it follows her directly but with 2 specific timelines. So it's her in the modern day, and then her when she was a young student coming to London to study drama from all the way from America when she was sort of 18 or so, and it's just what is happening in both those moments in her life. And really it comes down to a story about the decisions we make in life, and the kind of the forks in the road, and the points where we go down one direction rather than the other, and what does this mean for us in the long run. Evie has the opportunity to go and study drama further. She ends up having a child quite young. There's a lot of different things that sort of occur there, and she's sort of torn between 2 men during the oldest timeline, her as a young girl. It's also a story about friendship and relationships, because she is very close with a girl called Robbie, and there's a lot going on there. Kathleen Tesserow, rereading it, there were some weaknesses to the plot that I hadn't really noticed the last few times I've read it. I hadn't read this in about 3 or 4 years, so it has been a bit of a gap. The romances felt a little bit rushed in places, and I don't really know whether one of them was particularly necessary, or whether you could have cut it out completely and had it focused on Evie in the later half as such. But you know, it's still a really good book. It's a wonderful read, and it was lovely to return to something that I haven't read in such a long time. Then on audiobook I listened to The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. This is quite a short story, and as the name suggests, it's about the 5 people that you meet in heaven. A man, a very old man, I think he's about 80 when he dies in an accident at a theme park at the very beginning, and is a look at his life, and it literally is sort of a sweeping look. So various characters from his life, 5 of them in total, fully enough, are waiting for him in heaven at various points for him to discuss, you know, moments in his life that he was either dissatisfied by, or felt that he did the wrong thing, or maybe felt that he did the right thing but there was something else going on. It reminded me a lot of, there's a movie, Robin Williams in it, where his wife dies and they go through a trip through heaven. I will link it down below because it's a really wonderful movie, but it definitely reminded me of it. There's a lot of kind of undertones of similar sort of themes. It's a little clunky in the sense of it's naturally going to be quite preachy and quite discussing the meaning of life and what should you take from life and where should your life go kind of a vibe, because it is, you know, a biopic of a man and scanning everything, and like, how do you make your life meaningful on earth kind of thing. But I did really enjoy the audiobook. I thought the narration was wonderful. There were the odd touches of music in it which were really lovely. Yeah, it's a solid book. It's a classic for a reason. It makes it onto lots of lists of books you should read before you die for a reason. I think it is lovely and doesn't take very long to read, so give it a go if you want. Then we have the only book that I managed to get to in Thrillerathon, because that was the week that I started my new job and life got completely chaotic. So Thrillerathon was happening the 3rd week of February, and I had a whole big TBR plan, which I'll link down below, which I did not really get to. The one book that I did manage to read during the entire week was Kathy Reich's Devil's Bones, or Devil Bones. Yes, there's no S on devil. One devil and his bones. So this is the same author who is the producer of the TV series Bones, which me and my partner watch, and this is loosely linked to that TV show. Temperance Brennan is the name of the main character in both of them, but they are nothing alike at all. This is book number 11 or 12 in her whole series. I've not read the previous ones, but with so many crime books you can just jump in wherever you want. This did mean that there was a lot of interpersonal stuff that I wasn't particularly invested in because I hadn't read the previous ones, and it felt like we were spending a lot of time on it, which I wasn't bothered by because I hadn't done that groundwork before. So potentially, had I gone all the way back to the first one, I would have liked it more. I did not particularly get on with this book at all. I think the TV show is significantly stronger. My biggest problem with it was the writing style. One of the things that I really like about the TV show Bones is it does include a lot of science and a lot of interesting information, especially in the earlier seasons. The later ones do start to get too interpersonal, so maybe that was a problem with this book as well. But the scientific information in this book definitely felt very clunky and very forced, rather than it being sort of seamlessly worked through the story. There were just giant chunks of exposition, including things about the history of some towns that we were going through, going all the way back to when they were first built and made, and it just felt very unnecessary and a lot of padding. Also, Kathy Reichs has a habit of doing one particular writing device that I thought was just tired and overplayed in this book. And that is the fake cliffhanger at the end of a chapter. Now, we're all very familiar with the cliffhanger style ending that you would get in TV shows, especially ones which are about crime or criminal investigation, where something will happen, it will fade to black, you get a bunch of adverts, and then we ping back in. Because the adverts at least do give you a little bit of padding, a little bit of suspense. But when it's in a book, it doesn't work, because if you do some kind of like dot dot dot, what's going to happen next at the end of a chapter, I can find out because I just turn the page. In fact, for most of them, it's on one side, and then the other side, you can see the words. So I'm going to try and find some examples of some of the overplayed phrases that were at the end of chapters that I found really frustrating because I didn't think that they were very necessary. So, for example, we have here at the end of chapter 17, I had no idea that by day's end we'd score 2 more IDs, close a cold case, and come face to face with yet another perplexing religion. Do I need that? Like, really? I'm invested enough. I want to know about what's happening in the murder. Do I need this to almost spoiler the next chapter? I would say no. I will concede it's not at the end of every chapter, but it was often enough that I was annoyed by it. This is it. Slidell's answer was a shocker. Really? Do we need that? Because, like, look, that's there, and we turn it. Ah, look, I found the answer. Like, do we need that to be such a dramatic break? Honestly? Could you just tell me the answer at the end of the previous chapter? I would argue yes. I went straight to door 5 and discovered a chilling new world. Really? Really? Did you, Kathy Reichs? Did you really? Did you honestly discover a shocking new world? Am I going to find out that shocking new world in just like one page turn? Is this really necessary as a device? Maybe once. Maybe. That's 3, and I've only scanned through a quarter of the book. So I'm just saying, maybe stop trying to overhype things and just let the work speak for itself. Maybe. It also did suffer from a lot of the standard character tropes that you find in criminal, like in thrillers and crime writing, which is your tired detective who like calls people dull and probably has a drinking problem and all these kind of things, and like they're tropes for a reason, and if you really like that style of writing, totally fair enough. And maybe it's just that I'm not the audience for this. I don't read crime thrillers crazy often. I used to read a lot of them, and then I got very bored because they did seem to be very formulaic, and I haven't really gone back since. So maybe this one just was a little too classic example of the genre for me to enjoy. So that's my thoughts on Kathy Reichs. And then the final book that I read that I finished literally like last night, maybe the night before, was Libba Bray, A Great and Terrible Beauty. This one I actually started back in January, and then I put down for a period of time, and I decided to pick it back up. It is YA, and it is the first book in the Gemma Doyle trilogy. It tells the story of a young girl who, her mother gets murdered when they live in India, and then she gets sent off to a boarding school in London, and it turns out that there's some kind of underlying freaky spooky stuff to do with visions and powers and magic, and it sort of continues from there. It's sort of a murder mystery. There's elements of, like, strong elements of supernatural. Fun stuff happens. It's also set in Victorian England, which I found the Victorian elements to be just not very convincing, personally. It's like, as with my reaction with most YA, it was good fun and relatively easy to read, but I wasn't particularly invested in any of the characters. The plot was relatively obvious, or just span off in really random directions that didn't feel like that they were like intelligent, well thought out things that the author had planned from the beginning. It was just like, oh, that looks fun. And the historical fiction elements were poorly researched and not particularly a main framework for it. I'd say I probably gave it 3 stars. I really did enjoy reading it. I'm probably not going to pick up book 2 or 3. This was a bit of a spur of the moment thing where I got this not knowing that this was what the book was. It was like wrapped in brown paper and had a load of like, buy this if you like, blah 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 on the front, so I didn't realise I was going to be reading YA, which is not something that I tend to do, but it was entertaining and it was fitting at the time because like I said, with this new job, work has got really crazy. I don't really have the mental space to dedicate to like a really intense book right now because I'm busy learning the new role and trying to work out what this entails and everything. So this has been a really light, easy read on my walk to and from work because actually the plot is relatively easy to follow and I don't have to think too hard. So in that way I do appreciate the existence of YA for when my brain is too exhausted to focus on a more complex plot. Oh, and it's worth mentioning, because I did get a decent chunk of the way through it, I did start but then DNF Rosewater by Tade Thompson. Or Tade Thompson, I still don't know. I got that far the way through, probably about, what, 50%, give or take. It's not that it's not a good book, it's just that I don't think now is a good time or the right time for me to be reading it. Like I said, I don't have the mental energy to dedicate to something particularly complex. This is a sci-fi that has a lot of different timelines going through it, and it's that aspect of it that I'm really struggling with, keeping straight the actual chronological order of events and what they all mean interlinking, and I'm not making the connections that the author needs me to make to be able to enjoy this book because my brain is thinking about other things. So rather than plowing through and then have a disappointing reading experience because I'm not in the right place to read it, I'm gonna put this one back on the shelf and pick it up when life gets a little bit quieter and a little bit easier. So that's everything I read in February. I did try filming a March TBR video for you, including like a spinner wheel and then pulling things out of like hats and all sorts of stuff like that, but honestly with the way that life is right now, I don't want to limit my reading particularly or focus on any particular area. I just want to read whatever takes my fancy. As mentioned, life is hectic, need to save the brain space. This means that there will probably be more rereads and a lot of shorter reads, so just as a heads up, that might be happening on my channel, and the number of books that I read will definitely be going down. Probably gone are the days of getting into double figures for each month, but we shall see, you never know. So that's it from me. Have a wonderful reading week and I'll chat to you soon. Bye guys!